happy day, oh glory be. Hi folks, this is Chaplain Scott Savelle with you today, and I am excited to bring you my first prophecy update of 2024. So happy New Year. It's been a couple of months since I have had the opportunity to bring an update. Life has just been busy. I'm sure you all understand that. The holidays and spending time with family and friends and traveling and everything that really goes on over the course of what we refer to as the holidays, Christmas and New Year, and just a lot of other things going on. I just didn't have the opportunity until today, really, to bring an update. And today's update is going to be a little bit different than those updates I've brought in the past, because today I had the opportunity to facilitate a breakout session at a women's missions conference at the First Baptist Church of Hodgenville, Kentucky, and my breakout topic was Israel in Bible prophecy. And the organizers of the meeting felt like the ladies that were in attendance would be interested in hearing about what God says about Israel in His Word and how all of that fits into what's going on in the world today, especially going back to the events of October the 7th. So I recorded one of the sessions. I'll go ahead and apologize now because it's kind of difficult to hear the questions that the ladies are asking, but you can hear me just fine because I'm all mic'd up. All right, thank you for tuning in. Please do hit that like, subscribe, and share button, and share these video updates across your social media platforms if you don't mind doing that. I do pray that you and your family had a wonderful New Year, and I do pray that you enjoy this update. So let's jump right in.
I'm going to move this over here.
Thank you.
So they said we're just supposed to chat and ask questions, not just read this to you.
Okay.
But we'll start at the top. Israel, God's chosen people in prophecy. So I think the organizers wanted me to do this because Israel has been in the news a lot lately. I don't know if you watch the news, but we all know, hard not to. We all know, or I suspect most of us know anyway, what happened on October the 7th. I did not realize this at the time, but maybe a day or so later, they said that that was the worst slaughter of Jewish people since, at one time, since the Holocaust.
I did hear that.
Which just floored me. I mean, I just hadn't thought about it to that scale. But anyway.
What we've realized, I think, is how many people don't know Israel is God's chosen.
Right.
Right. That's been evident in the response from the attack.
It has definitely been evidence in the response. And I believe we have seen, here I'll move this back over here, that way I don't have it between me and somebody. I believe that because they are God's chosen people, they have God's divine, supernatural, or maybe we would say supernatural divine love upon them, even if they don't realize it, even if they don't act like it. But because they are God's chosen people, they also have a supernatural satanic hatred that is just centered upon them. I mean, you turn the TV on, you don't see news and the world's focus on, say, Brazil or some country down in South America or middle of Europe or Africa. It's always focused on that part of the world, and I think what happened on October the 7th just amplified that focus on that part of the world. And I believe that the closer we get to the return of Christ for His church, and the closer we get to what the Bible describes as Daniel's 70th week, we will see more and more stuff like this. So with that in mind, I mean, I can talk through the stuff on this page, or we can just chat. Y'all can ask questions or make comments. I did include some slides. I apologize. They're so tiny, but I had to fit all of them on this one page. But I got these from J.B. Hickson, whose ministry is Not by Works. He lives out in Colorado. He's done a phenomenal job with these slides, so I didn't see any point in reinventing the wheel. I paid him in Dallas a few weeks ago for a little flash drive he was selling. $32, had all these slides. I thought it was worth it. So I'm getting $1.50 worth this morning. Now on the back side, that little, I call it a grid at the top, looks like this. I kind of developed this over the last 15 or so years. I started out with 4 and it just kind of grew, and all of these are different, what we might call signs or trends that the Bible addresses that we will see in the lead up to the return of Christ and that last 7 years of history. So I use it to kind of sift the news. I'll see a news article and I'll say, where does it fit into this grid? So that's just there for your information. And then down at the bottom, the boundaries of the promised land. Modern day Israel is in that area with the solid black line you see there, but the land that is promised to them in the land covenant that God gave to Abraham and the Jewish people is all of that area you see darkened in. So that would include Gaza. It would include Lebanon, which is to the north. It would include parts of Syria, Jordan.
Well, is it true that Israel has tried to give Gaza?
Well, they did give Gaza. Well, during the, I think it was the 73 war with Egypt, when they captured the Sinai, they gave that back as part of the peace agreement that Jimmy Carter helped bring together. And Gaza they gave up under pressure, but they gave it up in 2006. And the very next day, Katrina strengthened to a Category 5 and came into New Orleans and devastated that part of our country. And so, if you look at the numbers, the percentage of Israelis that were, or Jewish people that were displaced as part of that pressured withdrawal, that same percentage per capita can be seen as being applied to the U.S. In the New Orleans area. So,
Well,
I don't want to say God did it, but it certainly
like
certainly makes you stop and think.
looks like more than a coincidence.
Yeah.
Other than Israel being the chosen people, and we know that's not why most Americans would say,
Right.
what makes us take a side other than that reason?
That's a good question. I believe we go back to at least Harry Truman, when Israel became a nation again in 1948, and his State Department was pressuring him not to recognize the new nation of Israel, but he shared how his grandmother taught him the Bible when he was growing up, and she taught him that the Jewish people were a special people, that they were God's chosen people, and that those who bless Israel, God would bless. And so at the end of the day, he recognized the new nation of Israel back in 1948. So I think it may grow out of some of that. I think part of it is
that they're the chosen people and they don't believe,
Yeah.
that's just...
There are a lot of secular Jews in Israel today that some of them would identify as atheist or agnostic. So in that sense, they may not recognize their chosenness, but at the same time, I think they recognize their uniqueness. I mean, there has never been a people that has been dispersed from their homeland and that has come back and has maintained their identity for 2,000 years and come back after 2,000 years. Never been a people. So that in and of itself, I believe, is a supernatural protection of the Jewish people. But I believe what it comes down to is really something going on in the spiritual realm that we can't see. It truly is supernatural. You cannot explain the just pure vitriol and hatred of the Jewish people that we see from some aspects of our society.
And especially on college campuses.
Oh yes, I mean there's no other explanation for it other than it's a supernatural hatred.
So they had been dispersed ever since the exile. And
They're technically, yes. I mean there's always been a Jewish presence in that part of the world we would refer to as Israel. But in 70 AD, the majority of them were dispersed at that point. There was handful. There's always been a handful of Jews in that part of the world, but the majority of them were sent out into the nations, as I believe Moses predicted they would be, and they
And they were out to 1948.
1948, and they maintained their peculiar Jewish identity even in all of that dispersion. Other nations or other people groups would just be absorbed into the nations around them, but the Jews, amazingly,
And there's so
were
many
not.
different sects of Jews. In
Yes, Orthodox, unorthodox.
Shiite,
That's Muslim.
that's Muslim.
Yeah.
What is that group that?
That's Hasidic.
Acidic. That's what I'm trying
Yeah.
to say. Acidic Jews.
They're my favorite because of all that. I just,
I see nothing but eyes.
Well, there was a comedian that said he's Catholic. I can't remember what his name. He said somebody asked him how many children he was going to have. He said, "I don't know. My wife is an acidic Jew." It could be 100.
could be 100. Well, two things to remember, and I got it on your page there. God deals in specifics, and God keeps His promises. And if you look to the left, there are 5 major biblical covenants. Now, depending on who you talk to, some will say there are 8 covenants, but I'm comfortable with 5. 5 major biblical covenants. 4 of them are unconditional, 1 of them is conditional. But the conditional one, the Mosaic covenant, was fulfilled in Christ and superseded by the new covenant. So we have God's covenant with Abraham, going all the way back to Genesis 12, to make him a great nation. And he really wasn't so much building a nation as he was sending a Messiah. And it is also through the Jewish people that we get the Bible. I mean, the Bible is except maybe for Luke, is a largely Jewish document. So God revealed Himself through His chosen people. The land covenant, which we've already talked about, the land. The Davidic covenant, which we actually celebrate every Christmas because I'm thinking about this king that would always reign on David's throne, being fulfilled in Christ. And then, of course, the new covenant that we celebrate and focus on every time we have the Lord's Supper together. But we never stop to think that that covenant is primarily given to the Jewish people. We're just recipients of part of those blessings because God never intended just for salvation to come to the Jewish people, but to the whole world. That's why He told Abraham, through you all the nations of the world will be blessed.
I noticed that when I'm reading Old Testament or New Testament, it was all the world.
All the world will be blessed.
It's an old hymn. Jesus included me.
So
when God deals in specifics, you can sure see that in Daniel's 490-year plan.
oh yes, you can.
How specific is that?
Which is what, and I didn't come up with this on my own, but the backbone of Bible prophecy. If you really want to understand Bible prophecy, particularly as it relates to Israel and the end times and the return of Christ, then you've got to really nail down 4 verses in Daniel chapter 9, which deal with the Jewish people. And if you look at that in history, we can see that the first 3 verses have been largely fulfilled in history, but the 4th verse has not. And so it's out there somewhere. At some point, God will fulfill that last verse, or that we call them weeks. And so you see that on the slide there to the right. So right now we are in what is known as the church age, and the church age was not revealed in the Old Testament. It was a mystery. And a mystery in the Bible is not like a Hardy Boys whodunit kind of a mystery. A mystery in the Bible is something remains concealed or hidden until God chooses to reveal it. And so the church age is one of those mysteries. It was never prophesied about really in the Old Testament. It wasn't mentioned in the Old Testament. But in the New Testament, we see that the church age was part of God's plan, and it fits inside that interval of verse 26 of Daniel chapter 9. And so the church age is not eternal. It will one day end. Romans chapters 9, 10, and 11 speak of the fact that God has not forgotten about the Jewish people. He's not given up on the Jewish people, but he mentions the Gentiles in there, and he says that when the fullness of the Gentiles has come in, then his attention will turn back to his chosen people, Israel. So the church age isn't so much date driven as it is numbers driven. And I tell people from time to time, you may, if you haven't been saved, you may be that one person that God is waiting for to come into the church before he calls the church home. And so the rest of us would really appreciate it if you would just stop it and come on to Jesus. So
Dee included that in her remarks today.
Yeah, I didn't hear them, but
come to Jesus. Let us come alongside.
But I think the events of October the 7th, and Israel just wants to live in peace. I mean, that's all they want to do. They want to live in peace. They want to raise their families, all of that. And I think that the events of October the 7th and their desire to make peace with their neighbors, we saw that in the Abraham Accord. I don't know, I always want to say Abrahamic, but it's Abraham Accord. Israel wants to make peace. I think all of this is pushing her towards ultimately entering into what the Bible refers to as the covenant of death, or the false covenant that will begin that last 7 years of this present age. So you see that on the slide to the left, just under the Israel 70 weeks. I take the book of Daniel there, well actually JB does in his slide, the book of Daniel, and then the bottom half slide takes the book of Revelation and just shows how all of this unfolds in the future. The Bible calls it the 7-year tribulation, Daniel's 70th week, the time of Jacob's trouble, the day of the Lord's wrath. And so that last 7 years is really the end times. People say, well, we're living in the end times. Actually, the church age is the last days. So we're living in the last days. And then that last 7 years is the end times. We might even say that that the end times goes all the way through the kingdom.
Mama. There's Mama.
Oh, there's Mama right there. Now I found her. All right. And then the bottom slide to the right just outlines God's kingdom program and how it does include the church age. You see the covenants there all come back together at the end of the age. After the 7-year tribulation, Jesus has returned physically to this earth, and he establishes his kingdom, and he reigns for 1,000 years, and then we enter the eternal state. So again, God deals in specifics, and God keeps his promises, and so we see that in the Jewish people, and it's really a good thing that we see that, because if God won't keep his promises and covenants with Israel, what makes you think he might keep his promise and covenant with you and me? I mean, he's promised to save us forever if we would believe on Jesus. Well, how can I know that's true? Well, I can know that's true because he's kept his promise with Israel, and he will keep his promises with Israel and the Jewish people even into the future. So,
isn't it true that Israel has, and maybe you can tell us how, has become pretty independent of the rest of the world in how they're sustaining themselves?
yeah, they are an exporting nation, so they do sustain themselves in that sense. They depend a lot on tourism, which obviously isn't going on right now because of the war that's going on. I mean, no tour company in their right mind would go over there right now. Personally, if somebody gave me the opportunity to go now, I'd probably go, but that's just me. But
even though they're such an arid country, haven't they developed themselves agriculture?
they have. They've learned how to basically make the desert bloom, which is basically what the Bible said. The Bible said when Israel was dispersed among the nation, the land would basically not sustain itself. Other nomadic tribes came in to that part of the world, but it just remained an arid desert basically until the Jews came back in 1948, and they began to developed ways to, they drained the swamps, they cultivated the ground, and now Israel for the most part blossoms. Now there's still some desert areas there in Israel, but for the most part, they got all these kibbutzes, these farms around Israel. Some were obviously in the news on October the 7th during those events, but God has blessed the Jewish people, and He has blessed the land because of the Jewish people, and I believe, of course, we will not see them dispersed again until the midpoint of the tribulation, but if they were dispersed now, I think you would see the land go back to its desert state, because God has only promised to bless it when the Jews are in the land. So yes, long answer to your short question, God. They are really a self-sustaining
He won't bless
nation.
it until they're back. Is that what you're saying?
That's what He said. So when they came back in 1948, He began to bless the land again,
Right.
and so the land has blossomed. Something else I was going to add.
What percentage of Jews are of the population of Israel is Jews?
I don't remember the exact date, but it was probably maybe around 2007 or so. There's still more Jews living outside of Israel than in Israel.
Yeah. Okay.
But for the first time, I think it was around 2007, there were more Jews in Israel than any other one spot outside of Israel, where there used to be maybe more Jews in New York City, for example, than there were in Israel. Well, now there are more in Israel than there are in New York, but we're seeing them, slowly return to Israel, which is what Ezekiel prophesied they would do just prior to the end of the age. So God is putting it in their heart, I believe, to come back, and even the events of October the 7th have caused some to want to go back to Israel. Anti-Semitism in the world causes some to want to return to Israel, because that's the only place they really feel safe.
Wonder what percentage of the American population is Jewish?
That I don't know the answer to.
That's
Probably 1 to 2%. I mean,
It's
that's
small.
it'd be small. I'm just guessing.
Is there a lot in New York? Is that
There's
the
a lot in
biggest, densest
New York,
population of Jewish people?
probably parts of Florida, Miami, maybe.
There's probably more that's a nationality or whatever
Then
than
you-
practicing Jews.
Yeah. And they tend to,
So not all.
I mean, even in Louisville, there's a Jewish population, and they tend to kind of live in the same area. St. Louis has a Jewish population. When I was stationed at Scott Air Force Base, which is in southern Illinois, we had a rabbi, and he lived in St. Louis in the Jewish neighborhood, so he would commute from that neighborhood to Scott Air Force Base every day.
Well, I remember I grew up in the Methodist church, and one night at MYF, on Sunday evening, the youth group, we had the only Jewish family in Glasgow at that time who had a store. And he came and, taught us about the menorah and everything. And I'll never forget that, because it was so interesting to me.
Well, David Rosenblatt married a good friend of mine from middle school at E-Town, and she was raised Baptist. And I asked somebody, I said, do you know if they're raising their children Jewish? And they didn't know. Because I thought how hard that would be.
Right, to be the only to
Right.
practice
Well,
your
we-
religion in a town where there was no place to
Well,
go.
or to compromise your beliefs so much that you would allow your children to be raised Jewish.
Well, we have a family.
That'd be a huge compromise.
We have a Jewish family in the small, and I mean small town I grew up in. I think today the population's about 2,000, so small, but one Jewish family that I'm aware of, and the husband is the Jew, but he married a Gentile, and I believe that they may have raised their children maybe in the Baptist church. I'm not 100% sure, but they celebrated Christmas, him not so much for Jesus, but just the gift giving and the family aspects of it. So I would say he's probably not Orthodox in that sense. And interestingly enough, we had a family, pretty well-known family, that the husband that came over from the Middle East, he was Muslim, married a preacher's daughter, Baptist. They agreed to raise the children in the Baptist tradition, and
That would be nice.
very well-known family down there in my little hometown. But it's just interesting to see how that works. Mhm.
Time it is. I got
I'm gonna
two
go
minutes.
ahead and stop my
Don't even
recorder.
know.
I think
I've had about
we've
4
chatted
minutes
as much as we're gonna
till.
chat.
Well, then it's